Thanks for doing this. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this idea that you had about perhaps what we could be looking at with 20 to 30 teams, perhaps deciding they want to orchestrate a deal either this year or in the following years to try to break away. I thought it was interesting. Did you have questions for me?
No.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do a short intro and then we get started. So I'm joined by USA Today sports columnist Dan Wolken. Dan, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, sir. First, we had the news that you relayed yesterday of the MAC deciding to cancel fall football and push to the spring. But we still have Power 5 football teams and Power 5 conferences, more importantly, that are pushing toward playing the season. Even after late last night, the University of Oklahoma decided to suspend practices. What do you think is the next step?
Well, look, I think that right now we're in a very tenuous situation. I think schools and conferences, as they get closer and closer to actually playing football, are starting to just take a clear-eyed view of the situation and just say, is this really a good idea? Because this is one you have to be right. You can't guess. You have to be right. And I think there's just a lot of concerns and worries that they don't know enough yet. So I think you'll probably end up seeing a pause of some sort. You'll end up seeing, that there's going to be some other type of delay, and where that leads is anybody's guess at this point. But it's just the trajectory of this whole thing is just not very good.
Have you at all been able to enjoy any aspect of what has been going on in college football? I haven't, even as I tried to.
Well, look, the way I try to look at it is just as a reporter, I'm trying to figure out what's going on a day-to-day basis, and that's a real challenge professionally. I try not to have an emotional stake in any sort of outcome or anything like that. I'm just kind of following where the facts go with all this. But just as a professional, it's been a massive challenge. And there's some interesting things about that. I've learned a lot, to be honest, over the last few months. But the whole situation is not enjoyable. I don't think it's enjoyable for anyone, and it shouldn't be. This is a pandemic, and it's going to have massive consequences for a lot of people.
One of those consequences is primarily, I think, going to have to do with how we look at college football, both from a labor standpoint and from an accessibility standpoint. And you had an interesting thought where you thought that perhaps 20 to 30 teams in the future could break away to form some variation of maybe a larger TV deal. Can you unpack that for me?
Yeah, I don't think it's a particularly revolutionary thought. I think if you look at the history of college sports, there has always been machinations that are there to chase the next pot of gold. I think it's why you've seen conference realignment every 10 to 12 to 15 years. It's why you see all the talk about what's next in the digital space. That there's just always some other way for these schools to try to maximize what their revenues are going to be, and they have taken advantage of those because they keep growing, they keep having more expenses, and of course, especially now with the COVID situation, it's going to be really tough. There's going to be fewer schools that can afford to compete at the same level they've been. There's going to have to be major cuts and belt tightening and financial ramifications of how these places are run. And so naturally, that's only going to push even more for some of these schools to try to figure out how to make more money. And the last iteration of that, the last sort of pot of gold that's going to be out there, is going to be taking all the most valuable properties in college sports and then putting them together and selling them as one, rather than conference by conference. And the way you would have to do that is by taking a group of schools and banding them together and selling their rights collectively. And, I'm not saying that this is going to happen anytime in the next few years, but it's sort of the natural, coup de grace of where the last 30 years have been heading, which is just you take the best and most popular and the schools that do the best ratings, and then they pull their media rights together, they sell just like the NFL, and they distribute them equally, and you've kind of gotten rid of the dead weight, and you've maximized what all those schools can be from a media rights standpoint.
It sounds like a new league and a new understanding as to how we talk about the players as labor. I mean, I feel like in media we have talked about them as a labor union unto themselves that we wanted to see happen. I have, but how do you think that this might go over in the future when there's going to be this money grab, either to expand the playoff or to add more teams to more TV? And how would we navigate that? Because that's the part of this that I think is most interesting is what do the details look like and how would we convince players that this is worthwhile?
Well, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of different things that are kind of rolled into one question. And I don't know what any of this is going to look like on the other side of COVID. I don't think anybody does. I think that the players over the last few weeks have been able to start the process of organizing. I think there's clearly an acknowledgement that they hold a lot of the power in these discussions, and yet they're not the ones who have been really just driving the ways in which the sport is run, or the safety standards, or the compensation. Kind of all the things that are really now coming to the forefront and really meaningful in this particular situation. It's really exposed, I think, for a lot of these players that they need to do more. They need to be more vocal and stick up for themselves. And so, kind of what that looks like as you get into the next iteration of college football post-COVID, that's anybody's guess. But I think there's a wide acknowledgement that things are going to be different.
And in things being different, I continue to have this conversation with kids. I call them my kids, but so many of them have so many different opinions about what's going on and whether or not they should be playing football at all. I wonder if we're listening to the right people as we continue to watch how this plays, because I've seen kids that are scared and I've seen kids that are like, I just want to go play. And at the same time, I see coaches that want to coach football and don't want to deal with perhaps 18 months without football or even what an abbreviated spring might look like. And the question that I'm getting to is, what, if anything, do we tell the kids about playing football at this point? Like, I don't even know that I would encourage them to play, even in the future.
Yeah, look, I don't know that I'd be willing to go that far. I think the first step is to be upfront about the risks. And that's the hardest part right now, is nobody really understands the risks. You hear about young people do fine with coronavirus and they're not going to die. Okay, great. Well, some are going to die just based on the numbers. That's, that's important to acknowledge. But also it's important to acknowledge that we just don't know certain things regarding the impact on the heart, on the brain. I mean, there's all these different studies that are looking at these things, and we don't have answers because it's new. We're finding out stuff every single day, and that matters, and I think that should factor into some of the decisions about, playing football. I mean, there's still clearly value in the game and value for the people who excel at it. And, at least with the NFL and other professional sports, you have an incentive structure that informs a lot of the decisions, and even guys who, end up getting, CTE or suffering some really bad consequences. Some of them will say, well, I would do it all over again because football did all this for me and my family. I mean, and I don't like to judge, those decisions that people make for themselves. But I do think it's definitely worth, understanding what the risks are when you get decide to play. And I think that's part of the problem is we just don't really know that yet.
Dan Wolken is columnist for USA Today Sports. Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Right on.